Hello, and welcome to the Döhle Yachts Coffee Break. I'm Joe Assail, and I'm the Technical Director at Döhle Yachts. Today we're going to be talking about the wonderful world of handrails and looking at how them, as well as bulwarks and railings, can affect the design of external areas. Today I'm joined by Ben Geary, our Fleet Statutory Manager.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Joe. Hope you're all well. The guys are listening to this. First, I want to talk to you really about why we have rails in the first place. They come from a load line issue and are a statutory rule requirement. These were created mainly, as it says, for the protection of personnel. There's to stop crew from falling overboard and from endangering themselves. How that gets related onto the super yacht market and the super yacht world is something that we're here to discuss, and the problems that you will find. What you have on screen, and if you want to pause it, please do, are the extracts from either load line, the reg codes, the Part A's, Part B, the Marshall Islands Code, and the Malta Commercial Yacht Code. What you can see from all four of these is they reference the same requirements because it all goes back to the load line issue. So the key here we're looking at, and what people are probably used to while listening to this, is the 1,000 millimeters. And the question that's often asked is, where do you take this 1,000 millimeters from?
That's right, Ben. The height that needs to be taken in order to achieve load line compliance generally is that 1 meter or 1,000 millimeters from the finished deck, so the top of your teak or whatever other finished surface that you have. And in this picture here, you can see that that height goes to the top of the railing that is positioned behind a seating area. Now, with a seating area that just butts up against a bulwark or a fixed railing like this one shown, then there's normally no dispute that the 1,000 from the finished deck is appropriate. However, when we have a larger seating area that starts to become somewhat of a sun pad or large sunbathing area, there is a discussion that needs to be had about where is appropriate to take the 1,000 millimeters from. Because if we take it from the finished floor and we end up with a seating area that is close to a meter, we'll have no protection to stop guests or crew members from tripping or falling over the railing. As a result of this, most flag states are looking at taking that 1,000 millimeters from what we refer to as the structural base of the sun pad. Now, sometimes there is a discussion about whether this measurement can be taken from the cushions. However, normally structural base is where we take this from. Now, not always are we able to increase the size of the railing behind the sun pad area. It either doesn't fit in with the aesthetics of the design for the exterior stylist, or on the interior, it actually just doesn't quite look right. As a result, we have a lot of discussions about how we can reduce this height. Now, one of the solutions we've found is to actually push the sunbed or seating area back away from the handrail or bulwark. As you can see in this drawing, we've done this by about 300 millimeters. Now, I would suggest that 300 millimeters probably isn't enough. There isn't a prescriptive distance here. As Ben mentioned, these regulations were written for cargo ships that have been sailing around for quite a long time. The load line convention rules are over 50, nearly 60 years old now. As a result, they never envisaged these types of arrangements. So there is no right or wrong answer, only the interpretation of your flag state classification society. So these discussions need to be had at an early stage of the design in order to find a solution that's going to work for your vessel. Now, that distance is normally described as a walkway around the outside of your seating or sunbathing area. So 300 probably a little small, 450 maybe doable. Sometimes I've even had it insisted that we would have a 600 millimeter gap around. It also depends on what's going to be on the other side of that handrail. Are we going to fall immediately overboard? Is it a clear drop? Are we on the main deck? Are we on the upper deck? Are we on a very high sun deck? Or if we fall, are we falling forward onto a brow that would actually prevent our fall from falling overboard? So there's a lot of different factors that can be brought into play here, and only really through discussion with the Flag State and Classification Society for each individual project can we actually get a clear answer.
As you can see on the next slide here, we have examples where the sunbed is blatantly not got a rail 1,000 mil above the base of that cushion. So it is a discussion point, and it is something that you need to be open and honest with people right from the start, because there are interpretations out there, and Joe and I are all too familiar with either sitting on the side of the fence of the class or as flag, or as now as the owner's representative having that discussion.
And what's important about having these arrangements agreed at an early enough stage in the design is to try and prevent any changes that could be costly or time consuming later on down the line. If this sun pad that we're showing here or seating arrangement hadn't been agreed at an early stage of design, and a flag state surveyor or class acting on their behalf had stepped on board and then decided that actually that seating area needed to be seen as a sun pad and they would expect to see a railing 1,000 millimeters above the base of the seat, then it would change the whole aesthetic look of this area.
So one of the questions we get asked an awful lot is, are glass bulwarks allowed? And if so, how? As you can see from this photo, obviously they are, and you'll see more and more yachts coming through onto the market with glass bulwarks or glass balustrades around the staircases. All of these are allowed, and again, we keep harping on about it, and I'm sorry for this, but it is a discussion that you need to have with both flag and class, because at the end of the day, it's flag that will allow you the glass balustrade, but it is class that more than likely will be involved in the testing and the structural analysis of allowing this to happen.
That's right. Not only are we seeing these on board, but we are also moving to a position where the regulatory requirements are becoming more consistent. The test shown here is actually one that's done to land-based standards. However, there is an international standard being developed for large yachts for glass bulwarks. As a result, there's going to be a more consistent standard that can be applied. At the moment, each classification society, and indeed sometimes each project, depending on region, will be relying on a different set of standards. So Ben's already mentioned that LR accept this. We're aware that DNVGL have been accepting these, and ABS recently sent out some requirements for their testing protocols. Now, all of these will hopefully be harmonised with the acceptance of the large yacht ISO standard for glass bulwarks, and that means in the future there will be much less of a discussion and a more prolific use of these, which have already demonstrated to be safe out on yachts. Now, as well as fixed handrails, we also have the option on board to have removable handrails, where we potentially don't have access to the deck area the whole time. So this can often happen with foldable platforms, swim platforms, and as shown on the screen at the moment, helicopter areas. Now, often these handrails need to be there in order to have safe access to the helicopter deck, but they cannot be in location during the helicopter operations. So we see lots of different options from foldable, retractable, or just portable. Now, if we have a portable handrail that needs to be removed every time there's a helicopter operation, it does bring to light the next point we want to bring up, which is actually storage.
It sounds bizarre when we are talking about some of these enormous yachts that storage is a problem, and it becomes more and more of a problem as these things start to get further and further down the design spiral and also into production, when space also starts to be realized that it is becoming less and less. The photo you see on the screen now is of a classic yacht scenario that we see. We see the operation of the garage, the tender out. These rails need to be stored somewhere, and also easy operation for the crew. These are both things that kind of, on our experience, are thought about at the right at the end of the project. All of the rails that you see there on the lower bathing platform, even though there's not much swimming done from it, are all removable, and they all need to be stored somewhere. So this is a key point that needs to again be discussed, potentially with flag and class, on where that storage is. How long does it take to put out the rails? Where are you going to put them? What is the procedure for putting them out and removing them? Because it's all very well when the yacht is on a nice sunny day, and also when you see Joe talking earlier about the helicopter decks. These rails are all very good when it's a flat, calm day, and it's easy and it's to put them out. But what happens if there's rough weather, if there's a big swell? This all needs to be taken into account. So ease of storage and ease of access to these rails is fundamental.
That's right. One of the issues we actually look at operationally once these vessels become in service is how are we going to get to the point where a crew member can safely move to fit the first rail. So we often look at risk assessments for the both assembly and then disassembly of these rails to make sure that crew can safely be working in those areas when they're not fully protected by the rails that are there in the first place to protect them.
So I suppose we'd finish by just saying thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. What we've tried to do is answer a number of questions that we get asked quite regularly from designers from all over the world, which has kind of spurred us on to create these bite-sized presentations to hopefully give you some reasoning about why the rule exists, but also ways and understanding of ways that you can try and meet those rules while still meeting the satisfaction of what your client's expectations are. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Our details, if you want to get in contact with us, are at the end of this presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you.